Presentation this afternoon. Gareth Dyke is my name, and I will briefly introduce my two colleagues joining me here for our presentation. First of all, Lucia Steele. Lucia, would you like to say a few words to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very excited to be speaking to people from China and the US and all over the world, so it's a good experience. As you're not showing your slides, would you like me to say a few words about me?
Yes, please. Absolutely.
Okay. My name is Lucia Steele. I represent a small publisher, so we publish 5 journals in the medical field, and we are based in Milan, in Italy. So I've been in the publishing industry for over 20 years, and I have experience in several submission systems and platforms and procedures and the like. And I think that's about it. Gareth, that's fine.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. I hope I'll get my slides back in a minute. But the other special guest who's joining us today is Giacomo Bellani. And Professor Bellani, maybe you'll say a few words to introduce yourself as well. That would be fantastic.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Gareth, for the special guest.
No problem.
And thank you for your time, and thanks to everybody. Again, I echo to Lucia's words. It's very exciting being connected to the work. My name is Giacomo Bellani. I am Associate Professor of Anesthesia and Critical Care Medicine at the University of Milan Bicocca. So we are also based in Milan. And you might wonder why a professor of anesthesia and critical care speaks about peer review, because as we will see over this talk, starting from a very bottom-up approach, so realizing the struggles and the issues that peer reviewers encountered a few years ago with a very good friend of mine. We founded a small company called ReviewerCredits, which is focused exactly on peer review. And my core business personally is still doing the professor at the university, working as a professor at the university. But I'm really glad to see that what was an idea and the chat between two friends on a beach is now a small but still working company. And so thank you so much, Gareth, and thanks TopEdit for making this webinar possible.
Yeah, thank you very much once again to my two special guests for joining us. I know that Ning Zhang, the founder of TopEdit, will jump back in to this presentation at a number of points as we go through our content. Today, let me say that ReviewerCredits.com will share with all our participants the slides. We had prepared like just a few slides, nothing special, so you're not missing anything. That's not a big deal, but ReviewerCredits.com is a website that you can go to, that you can check out. Right now, if you're sitting in front of your computer, this is an innovative and independent platform, as Giacomo just said, that supports the peer review process by quite cleverly supporting and validating peer reviewers. Now, if you're an academic, as we all are on this panel this evening, you'll know that when you do peer review for a journal, you get invited to perform peer review, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but you never, ever, ever get any payment or often anything for your time and effort. And this is often a big sticking point amongst colleagues around the world. They feel, why should we give up our time to perform the peer review process? So the ReviewerCredits platform, conceived by Giacomo and his friend on the beach, as he was just mentioning, aims to provide tangible rewards to reviewers. So they've partnered with a number of publishers, they've partnered with a number of companies like TopEdit to provide you with rewards. So if you do a review and you're registered on the ReviewerCredits.com platform, you can then go into the ReviewerCredits store and access content, access other things that you can get in return for credits that you accumulate for your review. So ReviewerCredits.com as a site that you can join is a great idea for you to get some credit for your research efforts, for your peer review efforts. Gareth is my name. I'm a writer and educator. I've been working as a researcher developer for a number of years, publishing lots of papers, managing lots of journals, writing lots of articles, and helping and managing the peer review process. Now, we talked to a bunch of people before we started this presentation planning, and we came up with a number of frequently asked questions that colleagues around the world often have about the peer review process. So we're going to dive in a minute and start to talk with our panelists here on the line this evening, Lucia and Giacomo, about these questions, and we hope that we'll have some answers to your questions around peer review. But don't be shy. This is not just about the three of us and the four of us when Ning comes back on the line. This is about your questions. So if you have questions, please don't be shy. Put them into the chat box. You're watching, I know, around the world on a number of different platforms. Put your questions into the chat box. We'll definitely have a bunch of time at the end of our session to go through some of your frequently asked questions. Maybe you're currently dealing with peer review at the moment. Maybe you're currently wondering whether you should do peer review. We have the opportunity to ask our experts your questions. Now, I wanted to get started by just saying that I've done lots of workshops online around the world about peer review, and we usually start our workshops by asking our participants in a poll, what do you think the main goal of peer review is? Is it to make sure that famous professors like Giacomo get their work published in those leading international journals? Is it B, to make sure that we maintain the integrity of scholarly publications? Is it C, to help us as authors improve our work? Or is it D, to get a look at all the data? Now, most people, when they're asked that series of questions, they think that peer review is about helping authors improve their work. Well, actually, the main goal of the peer review process in international journals and publishers around the world is to maintain the integrity of scholarly publications, to maintain integrity, to make sure that we can trust and we can use with confidence work that gets published in those international journals. We'll come back to that and we'll talk about that in a minute, but it's very surprising, to me at least, that when you ask authors what do they think the main reason for peer review happening around the world in journals is, they don't often know what the reason from the publishing industry perspective is. They think about it from their perspective as authors. So peer review, of course, it's the process by which we judge the transparency of the quality and transparency of academic work, research work that gets published in international journals. Peer-reviewed papers are thought to be reliable because they've gone through that process before publication. So it's all about trust and transparency. Let's dive in. Let's talk about what that means for us as academics and for those of us who manage academic journals. So we're getting to the exciting part. As I mentioned at the beginning, we asked a panel of people from around the world a number of questions about peer review before we came to our session this afternoon. I'm going to jump in and I'm going to get started by asking Lucia the first of our questions. But don't worry, you'll have your chance to ask your questions as well. Write them into the chat box. Get in touch with Ning. We will be answering your questions as well. So that's enough talking from me. First question, which specific difficulties, Lucia, do you feel that a small publisher encounters when ensuring the peer review process is happening?
That's a good question, but I would say that there are several difficulties that you encounter as a small publisher, considering that our main aim is to provide a structure for reviewers and authors and readers to access content. So we have to make sure that all the wheels work together in a nice way. Okay, so we have to ensure we have strong, suitable editors, and that these editors actually have a good editorial board and select appropriate peer reviewers. We have to make sure that all the tools work for these people so that the peer review system works and works to the reviewer's benefit, because they ultimately are the people that help the journals to provide the good content that we are talking about. We also support the editorial board through routine checks that are done whenever a submission comes in. So we do an initial technical screening, we do a similarity check, and we try and pick out the biggest faults that the manuscript can have before it reaches the reviewer, about technical issues. And then I would say one of the big difficulties for a small publisher is to have a lot of reviewers and have a good relationship with reviewers. What we lack is the numbers and the participation that we would really like to see. So a lot of reviewers that knock on our doors and say, come on, we are ready for review for you. That doesn't happen. So we have to build a strong and trusty relationship with reviewers. Editors are asked to be, to do the same, because you need to build a faithful and trustful relationship with the peer reviewers, because then only ultimately they turn back with commitment to peer review articles for our journals. This, I think, is probably the most difficult step that we have. Other than, once you have engaged reviewers, we have the normal problems that any publisher will have, is to make peer review comments turn around in suitable time so that we provide a publication and a decision within a good time, good average time. Another critical point that you were mentioning, and I think that's more general for a small publisher, is that not to be considered a predatory publisher. So this is one of the nasty words that we hear more or less everywhere, and there are some measures that you take so that your publishing company and your journals grow into consideration in a healthy way. For instance, joining appropriate institutions like OASPA and then depositing policies. So that's another part that we do. I'm pleased to say that ReviewerCredits supported us in this step, because peer review is transparent, and whenever a peer review is completed for our journals, it's registered in ReviewerCredits, which is an independent organization, and I think this was really valuable for us. This is more or less the main difficulties that we have. Gareth.
Okay, thank you very much. What I'd like to just say, as we get going on our discussion this evening, is that a large number of our audience joining us today are not native English speakers, and so if I could just ask you to repeat a few of your key points with a slower speech, would that be possible? Thank you so much.
Yes. Okay, let me just. As a publisher, we have to ensure that we have suitable editors for our journals. Okay. A competent editor will enroll a good editorial board. Yeah. We also have to ensure that procedures and tools are in place. That means submission system, peer review system, publication processes, and websites. All this has to be provided for the journals. We also help our peer reviewers and editors with initial checks, like, for instance, a technical check. And in this technical check, we also judge the language so that it's suitable, for instance. If a manuscript is written in a really clunky English, we suggest that it's rephrased somehow so that it's easier for a peer reviewer to evaluate the content, which is what the peer reviewer has to concentrate on.
Right.
We use similarity checks so that we pick out a major faults that could be in a manuscript. And also some of the major technical issues may be ruled out at the beginning when a manuscript is received and ironed out, so corrected before a manuscript is offered to a reviewer for peer review. Another big difficulty that we have is engaging reviewers. That means involving people and getting them to volunteer and peer review for us. We have a smaller panel of reviewers, and we have to build a relationship which is full of trust and transparency for them. So they have to know that we ask them in good faith to review a manuscript for a serious journal. One of the big threats that we have is also that of being classed as a predatory publisher. Okay, unfortunately, there are many journals that are not serious, so you have to apply serious ethical issues, ethical processes, and make sure that your policies are clearly identified in your journal's website, but also that you deposit them and you apply them to manuscripts. So you have to behave like a good publisher, even if you are a small publisher. So you have to really pay a lot of attention to the organization you join and the sites where you deposit your information to. We found a good help in reviewer credits because it credits reviewer transparently and independently, and this usually it helps peer reviewers to realize and acknowledge the trustfulness of our journals. It's all out there to be seen.
Okay. And,
there's nothing hidden.
And just remind us the name of your journal again.
Well, we have About Science. We are About Science.
Okay.
We publish 5. So we are a small publisher. We publish 5 journals in different medical subjects. Do you want me to spell them out for you?
About Science, right? So,
it's the publisher.
So we'll follow up with all of our participants with slides and additional information about your publishing company, because I know that colleagues around the world, big issues that colleagues face. Which journal to pick for their next paper. So it's useful to have information about good journals. You mentioned English language checks. That's important. We always ask reviewers not to comment on the English if they can, because that's not their job. That's the editor's job. But that's the #1 comment that reviewers always make. They often go in and edit papers when, that's not necessarily their job. So for this reason, like, colleagues around the world will be wondering, like, should I get my paper edited by a native speaker or a company like TopEdit before I submit it? Often it's a good idea. We'll probably talk, I'm sure, again about plagiarism. You mentioned similarity checks. That's another key area that colleagues around the world are interested in. How to avoid plagiarism, how similar can my paper be to other published articles, and predatory, avoiding getting perceived as a predatory publisher. So that's a great start to our discussion. I'll jump over to Giacomo now, because I know he's wondering when he's going to get the chance to say a few words. But Giacomo, why do you accept to do peer review? What is it about the process that makes you take it on, given that you don't get paid for it and you often don't get credit for it?
Thanks, Gareth. So first, I need to slightly correct you, because I think that in regard to the question you posed, the purpose of peer review is exactly to have professors like me publishing papers.
Of course, yeah, I forgot, yeah.
No, but I would like to also comment on that question, because I think it's really bright, but maybe we will see it on the next, during the discussion. So in regard to what you're asking me now, I think I start a little bit from my personal experience, and when you are maybe just a postgraduate PhD student, you start to get invited to peer review some papers. You feel very, very proud and very honored, because you think editors are finally realizing your standing, your role. This is true. I try to accept peer review because I think it is, it's a sort of, I wouldn't say moral duty, because maybe this is a little bit too strong, but in a way, it is an obligation that as scientists, as academics, we do have to make sure that for what is the contribution that we can give, we give it, making sure that good papers and solid papers, so that the principles of integrity of publishing are respected. And so we should do our job. Other people do our job on our own papers. And when you're an author, you're always there, at least I am always there looking if there is any change in the manuscript status, and you're say, okay, this manuscript has been in peer review for 1.5 months, and when will they get back to me? But at the same time, you should realize that yourself have to fulfill this sort of duty. And, sometimes it's quite interesting and fun also to do it. You feel like it's also a courtesy to colleagues, to look at their papers. Not, it's a small reward. So at 50% of the time, 60% of the times, the authors of the papers, or at least some of the authors. And I think there's nothing wrong in this. I mean, that's life. I work in the field of mechanical ventilation. There's a number of scientists that do this, but it's not, infinite. So, and in a way, I feel it's also a matter of a courtesy to a colleague who maybe peer reviewed a paper of yours, to review objectively a paper of him or her, and try to be fair. Not because he's a friend of you need to write that the paper is great. And at the same time, you have to be, as I say, you have to be fair. So that's the reason why I do accept peer review. At the same time, I must say that recently, and this might seem a bit contradictory to what I'm doing, I am declining a number of invitations because, it's not fair also to accept something you cannot commit to. You don't have time, you don't have, so it's not wise to accept all invitations and then get as Lucia was mentioning, send back the reports very late or just send a sloppy report. So that's why I tend not to accept peer review invitations, or I do not accept peer review invitations which are clearly out of my field. And this is a proof of lack of seriousness from the journalists inviting me. I get invited to review papers on, on topics which are on medicine, but clearly that have nothing to do with me. And clearly this means that my email was just picked up in a long list of people who published. And that's really an issue because, as Lucia was saying, a small journal does not mean that it's not a good journal. Like you can have very small unknown journals because there are so many, you never heard of them, but they're very serious and very, very precise. But at the same time, there are also quite some large and known publishers that are lacking of seriousness in this respect. So that's why I do peer review.
Are there, it's a great answer. And are there situations where you turn down peer review because you feel too close to the authors on a paper? Like how would you deal with a conflict like that?
I tend to email the editor in this. It happened to me like once. I got a paper to review. I knew very well the author, and the author did ask me some suggestions about this paper, and so I wasn't credited as an author because it was just chatting on the hallway during the conference. So but in that case, I really told the editor, well, I don't think I'm objective enough to peer review this paper. In most cases, I just email the editor saying, I'm very close to the authors. What should I do? And 90% of the case, they say, go ahead, write your paper. Because, science has a lot to do with trust. So if the editor trusts you because of your integrity, she or he also will trust that despite you're a close friend of someone, you will still be fair. This is one of the reasons I personally, but this is not ReviewerCredits speaking, this is Giacomo Bellani speaking. I am personally not much in favor of the models where peer reviewers' names are published, are known, because I think that it's very unlikely that you would write a bad report to a friend of you, knowing that he or she will know that you were the peer review. So if you ask me, once again, Giacomo Bellani, not ReviewerCredits, personally, I like the single blind model. As ReviewerCredits, we credit all kinds of peer reviews because, of course, we believe that each journal is free to adopt the practice that they feel most appropriate.
Yeah, so colleagues listening to this will be aware that most journals use either single blind peer review, so that's where the reviewers know who the authors are, but the authors don't know who the reviewers are. That's called single blind peer review, or double blind. That's where both the reviewers, as Giacomo just mentioned, and the authors are unaware of each other's identities. Now, very interestingly, although you might think double-blind peer review is the best way to go in terms of removing bias from the process, actually, in journals where authors are given the choice, will you pick single-blind or will you pick double-blind, most authors still pick single-blind peer review. They still want reviewers often to know who they are as authors. So that's very interesting. But in some developing countries, people tend to pick double-blind peer review. So a good example is China. Chinese authors preferentially pick double-blind peer review if they're given the choice. So that's very interesting. It's well worth thinking as an author what's best for you when you make your next submission. What do you think is the fairest way to get your paper evaluated? You can pick a journal that uses the kind of peer review that you like the best, or you can pick a journal that offers you a choice. Lots of journals offer a choice. Great stuff there. You talked about conflict, like when not to review. And also a big question that colleagues often ask us is, I've submitted a paper to peer review. How long should I wait before writing to an editor to ask for an update? I don't know if you want to jump in on that one quickly, Lucia. Like, how long do you think that an author should be waiting before sending that email to you, the editor, and asking for
I am actually, and this is as Giacomo likes to say, I'm Lucia speaking, I'm very precise. Yeah. So when you commit to a peer review of, say, 30 days, yeah, I would like that 30 days to be kept, because I think it's a kind of, it's polite to other people, and this is in anything, not just in peer reviews. So I would really like that the time that you declare are kept. Unfortunately, this is not the reality. Often reviewers take a bit more time than what you accommodate for various reasons. Most of them are good reasons. So we are all sort of overburdened with activities. So I think that more frequently than not, reviewers really don't have the time to go through all their work. There are people that do another type of work as well. Yeah. So you're asking a lot of them. But if you estimate that your peer review takes, say, 4 weeks, I think an author could start writing a reminder after 6 weeks, 5-6 weeks. I think that would be reasonable, acceptable. And as a publisher, we always try and find out where we stand and give a proper answer to the author. Great,
great. So, I mean, we provide advice for young researchers who are thinking whether they should do peer review. Like, you get that email invitation from that, about science journal, let's say. You're a young researcher. What should you do? Well, we encourage you to think, do you have the time? As Giacomo highlighted, it's better to not take it on than to do a bad job or to take like way too long to perform peer review. Is this your expertise? As Giacomo also touched on, like, are you really competent to provide a peer review in that subject area? And from authors who ask us how long to wait, I always say, communicate, don't wait. If you're waiting longer than about 6 to 8 weeks, then it's time to really think about writing a polite email to the editor. We get lots of emails that are impolite, that are quite aggressive. Where's my paper? Where's my article? So I always say also, like, try to give something back to the editor when you write that email. Maybe I can suggest some more reviewers. Maybe there's a delay. Here's a few more suggestions. Polite and constructive. That makes the editor feel, more likely to help you as an author, because nobody likes to get those, hey, where's my paper? I've been waiting for 3 months kinds of emails. So that's a good tip for researchers thinking about writing to the editorial board. So, I mean, we'll move on to like our next question. And this is a question for both of you. So, but I'll come to Lucia first, of course. Like, do you think peer review is an important part of academic publishing? And if so, why? Why can't I just publish my papers anywhere I want? Why can't I put them on preprint servers and that's it? I mean, that's a big deal these days.
I think, as you were mentioning right at the beginning of this conversation, Gareth, peer review is the only system today somehow that gives trust and integrity to anything that you write. So yes, you could write and pay to write your article anywhere, but who's going to say that it's a good one? You just leave it out to the big sea of researchers to comment on, and maybe you would look out as an insane researcher if you publish something which is totally out of line. Yeah. Maybe a reviewer would save you to look like an insane researcher because they give you good comments on build your research in a better way, and you grow in that. For us, it's definitely a vital part of publishing. We couldn't do without reviewers. We love reviewers. It's we only exist because there are reviewers out there that help us to publish our journals. So I would say that it's almost like a marriage. Are we still there?
Yep, we're still there.
Okay, so I would say that it's a very close marriage with reviewers in a way. We try and support them because they need a lot of support. We realize how busy and how under pressure they are, especially in the last 12 months or so. So we do as much as we can to make them feel well looked after in a way. So it's the only way, it's the only system today that ensures that what you publish is worth publishing and it's not a total lot of rubbish.
Yeah.
So we couldn't do without it.
But,
so it is important, in short.
Yeah, and we'll go to Giacomo because, like, what about preprint servers, Giacomo? Like in your field in particular, and we've seen this massively throughout the pandemic. Like much research that's not peer-reviewed is being covered in the media in particular.
No, I think that so starting from preprints, and then I will also try to answer your question. Again, Giacomo Bellani speaking, not ReviewerCredits. I look with some suspicion to preprints, okay? Because if I see some papers I have seen as reviewers whose quality was really low and which were not trustable at all, thinking that these could be preprints, already put on the web because of the decision of the authors without any peer reviews. Yes, of course, then there is peer review and they cannot be preprints forever. But at the same time, some patients in the field of medicine could be treated based on what is written in those preprints. So personally, I don't, not that I don't like preprints, but I tend, let's say, not to rely too much on the information which is out there. I think what preprints do, which is useful, is that allow you to keep an eye on the fact that there is a paper on that subject which is almost ready. So, for example, if you want to engage in a given research, already you could start and have an eye on what other researchers did, and and follow the track of that paper. It's a sort of head up that will come out. Personally, I like the model that some journals have, like Intensive Care Medicine has. It's a journal in my field. They have a 7-day publication profile. So if you think your paper really needs urgent publication because it brings important information, then you submit a paper, and if the editor says, okay, I think it's worth, they commit to publish it in 7 days. if it is accepted. I think it's a model that is wise, because, you know, you don't put everything out there without any peer review, but at the same time, for those papers who really need fast publication, then it allows this to happen. Clearly, COVID changed everything, and during COVID, we wanted, in a way, to have preprints, and those were necessary. But as I hope COVID was a very unfortunate parenthesis, once we go back to real to normal life, I think that the preprint model, at least in the field of medicine, and I would say generally speaking, biological science, it's a model I trust to a given point. If I may say a few words in regard to your original question, why is important peer review? I think absolutely, I do agree with you that the right answer would be to allow integrity, to make sure paper that we publish are trustworthy. And if I make it again a little bit, give a personal experience on this, when I speak about reviewer credits to people that are not from the academic field, already it takes half an hour to explain them what peer review is. And at the end of the day, they said, "Oh yes, I understand," but you realize they didn't actually understand, because it's a strange model, because you are at the same time an author and a peer reviewer, blah blah blah. But at the same time, it is dramatically important for your lives. People do not realize how much peer review enters in our lives. Think about trusting the vaccines nowadays, or trusting every medicine we take, or the brakes of our car, or the concrete of our house. I mean, most of these get out because of industrial development, but also scientific innovation. So it heavily impacts our lives. And so peer review, allowing good quality research to be published, is definitely relevant to anybody. As a last point, I would like to say that, yes, peer review aims to maintain the integrity of papers, but as a fringe benefit, most times also you get an improvement of the paper. So every paper is better, normally, most papers, I would say, are better after the peer review process. So yes, the main goal is the maintaining the integrity. I totally agree. But as a fringe benefit, you get an improvement in the quality of the paper, which is very important. And I think it's what gives more satisfaction to the reviewer. To the reviewers like the idea that they helped improving the paper.
Great. I'm aware of time a little bit, and we've got lots of questions coming in from our various channels. So lots of colleagues watching this from all over the place. So what I'd like to do, Lucia and Giacomo, is just ask you quickly our next question, both of you. Just a short answer. Do you think, Lucia, that peer reviewers should get paid for their work on academic articles?
I would say that's a very, very difficult question. It would be quite a tipping point in the publishing industry, because somebody will end up paying for it in an already expensive world, in a way. So whilst probably the purpose, the principle would be correct, the practice would be quite, I would say, well, devastating is a bit much, but it would certainly create havoc in the publishing ecosystem. There are lots of other questions, but I'm also aware of the time, so I'm not sure that would be a good step to take. But a kind of rewarding, I think it's definitely due to reviewers somehow.
That's where ReviewerCredits.com fits into this ecosystem so perfectly. I once asked this question to a guy from PLOS, and he said, he laughed at me, and he said, there's not enough money in the world for us to be able to pay reviewers for all the work that they do. Giacomo, your thoughts on this? Should we get paid?
No, I mean, I echo to Lucia. I see also from an author perspective, like if you really were to pay a professor for his time, I mean, it's a lot of money, and I don't think paying directly people makes good sense. This does not mean that we should not give something back to reviewers. Like, as you said, I use my time not to publish a paper of myself, and to review something else, some other papers. So in a way, peer review is injuring, if you wish, my own career. So that should not be the case. We have to give something back to reviewers. It shouldn't be money, I agree, but this doesn't mean that assuming there will always be a review for nothing back, it's not wise either.
It's a very, very, very hot topic. I'm going to bring Ning back in if you're still with us, Ning, and because I know there's a few questions from the Chinese audience that we want to put to our two experts. If you're there, Ning, is he still there? Maybe he's not listening. Okay, all right.
Do you want? Maybe we can.
Yeah, I've got
say a few words on the last question.
Yeah, give us your worst experience with peer review. Then go on. Then I'll give you mine in a minute.
Well, I don't really have big negative experiences with it. I think I have a nightmare with regards to reviewers, and is forget to thank them somehow. You reach the end of the year and you don't even say, "Oh, thank you very much for helping us." I suppose that's my nightmare. Reviewers I've worked with, they've always been very compliant and very professional. So maybe I've been lucky. I don't know, but I don't really have a negative experience with reviewers. I'm keen to listen to yours.
Giacomo?
So again, quickly, the best is once I reviewed the paper, the other two reviewers were really enthusiastic. This is very nice, blah, blah, blah. I said, the authors basically, I wrote 2 lines. The authors published the same cohort of patients. They just, 2 years ago, they just added a few patients in this. It's nothing novel here. And the editor rejected it, despite the other 2 reviewers wrote very nice comments, except they forgot to look at what the same authors had just published. So this was a nice experience because it really made me feel, useful in a way. The worst experience generally is when you editors, either they send you a paper which clearly they would never accept in their journal. So I'm like, did you ever even look at this? Why do you send out this paper for peer review? Clearly you will never accept it. Or for example, you say, reject this paper, other reviewers write differently and they send it back to you. So the editor is free to do whatever she or he wants, but I said reject and I won't change my mind. You are clearly free to publish this paper, but if you keep asking me, I keep saying the same, I won't change my mind. Yeah. So this was essentially my struggles is in relationship with the editors then. And tell us about yours.
Oh, my field is my paleontology background can be quite filled with some aggressive characters. So I had one paper that was reviewed once where the reviewer wrote, "This is the worst piece of rubbish I've ever seen in all my really, really nasty." And people get very personal. I think that encapsulates my most negative experiences with peer review. So for no reason other than they may not respect you as a researcher, or they may not think that the work is particularly good, or people just tend to feel when they go into the peer review process that, I'm going to think of reasons to reject this paper. Hey, why aren't I, an author on this paper? It's really kind of captures both the worst and best of human nature a lot of the time, I feel. Ning is back, I think, so I'm going to bring Ning back because I know he wants to jump in with some questions from our Chinese audience.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Yes. I have a few questions. The first one is, if my English is not good, so if that affect the peer review.
I may say, from a, let's say, peer reviewer perspective.
Yes.
So as Gareth says, peer reviewers do well. The fact that they should not judge English, I think it's not always the same, because in fact some journals even have an explicit question: is the English good or bad? So depending on what journals, some journals ask. I tend to look more at science than English, but at the same time, if really the language is not adequate, it's hard to understand, and reviewers maybe get, I wouldn't say irritated, but they get something more quickly, or perhaps they don't perceive that there is good science enough. So on one hand, technically it shouldn't affect you. On the other hand, having your paper reviewed by a professional service would definitely increase your chances that your peer review process, that you get not necessarily good comments, because still science could be poor, so the paper would be very well written, but science is poor, but at least a very fair comment. Right. So I think that's useful. That's something useful to do, having a pre revision of English language. Personally, we do it sometimes. Sometimes we trust ourselves, or maybe we have a co-author who is an English native speaker. But often, sometimes we also refer to professional services like TopEdit, for example, and I think what we're trying to do at ReviewerCredits is exactly something like this. You've been a reviewer, you read the paper on someone else. We try to help you, for example, with a discount, publishing your own papers. So the model of giving back.
That's great. So Ning, that was, do you have another question there for Lucia?
Yes. So another question is how to guarantee the justice of peer review. I think most of the audience, they care about that.
Help me to understand is how to guarantee the justice of the peer review, to make sure the comments are correct and fair. Is this what the question is?
Yeah, maybe sometimes they have the reviewer are a competitor or something like that, so they give bad comments, but not positive. I mean, not fair, something like that.
Yeah. I think, as Giacomo mentioned earlier, science is based on trust. So you have to put enough trust also in your reviewers, and to be fair to their work that they examine and they review. You cannot guarantee it. You don't know what relationship your reviewers may have. You don't know if a member of your board is totally against somebody else. But I think possibly the editors have more visibility of this type of relationship if they could be conflicting. As publishers, probably we don't know the relationship behind editors, reviewers, and especially if they are conflicting ones for competitive reasons. So we have to put enough trust in the reviewers, but it could be difficult to pick out a negative comment just for spite. Giacomo, please, your experience on this, because I think it's more...
No, I think it's an extremely fair point. Nobody likes to... Well, if you get positive comments, you will think that the review process was perfect. All these reviewers are really wise. If you get negative comments, you will start to... I mean, it's human nature. You think something was unfair, and sometimes indeed it is. I think, as Lucia says, the editor is very important in this. The editor is a scientist and is in the position to judge whether the peer reviewer comments were fair or not. You can object some reviewers during your peer review process. So if you know that someone is really against your paper, you can say, please exclude this name from the name of the reviewers. and occasionally, but I think it's something you should really do parsimoniously. You might think of appealing a decision, right? I remember once as a one of the first papers we had sent to a journal a while ago, it was rejected. We thought it was unfair, and my mentor wrote an email, and the object of the email to the editor was in Latin, quis custodiet ipsos custodies, that in Latin meant who guards the guardians themselves, who you know what I mean. And still the appeal didn't work. So but anyway, I think overall, as Lucia said, overall the model works. If the more the reviewers are happy to do peer review, engaged in the process, the more it's likely they are fair and they are numerous enough to be, you know, to be spread. Also take the peer review, I mean, try to be a little bit self-critic. So try to read the reviewers' comments and think why they could be right, because your reasons why you are right are obvious to you. But try to say, wait a minute, why could this reviewer be right? And that would help supporting your, improving your paper, I think.
Yes. I have a follow-on question. So when you have a very opposite comments from two reviewers, so what will you do next? So you will find another reviewer. I mean,
you get two opposite comments.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Flip the coin.
Yeah. No, we involve another one. When there is conflicting comments, we engage an additional reviewer or more than one.
Okay.
So yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
And we follow up appeals as well. Say?
No, at the same time, I think it's important to recall that editors, that reviewers are sort of consultants or support editors, but in a way, like in the example I made, the editor could, I mean, it's not just summing up points, you know, it could even decide that one of the reports is better done than the other one. So, but sometimes I think involving a third party, maybe on a specific question, you know, the reviewers disagree on this.
Well, I'm aware that we're coming to the end of our time together this evening, but I see lots and lots of questions. So we got a huge number of questions over the course of this session. So what we'll do, ladies and gentlemen, is we'll put together a Q&A document that we can share with our audience today. And thank you ever so much, everybody, once again for listening to this. We've got audience members from not just China, but all over the place with us today. So if you have further questions or you've asked a question, we'll come back to you with a Q&A document. Don't forget, don't worry as well, that everybody will get access to a video recording of this session, as well as the small number of slides that we put together. So that will happen automatically. You'll get like a link to a recording. And if you need an attendance certificate, then you can also get in touch with me, Gareth Dyke, if that would be something that you need. If you want, I see some people in the chat are asking for additional training, how to improve my skills in writing in English and peer reviewing. Have a look at ReviewerCredits.com. Have a look at the YouTube channel in particular of ReviewerCredits. Also, TopEdit has lots of content on their YouTube channel as well to help people with peer review, writing, and publishing. I'll thank Lucia and Giacomo for their participation. And I don't know if Ning, you want to come back in before we sign off this evening.
Hi, I'm back.
Okay. Well, on my part, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks.
Pleasure
for
to meet
your
you.
time.
Thanks. Looking forward next one.